Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for Science and Reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 820 for the 23rd of June, 2024. Richard Saunders coming to you from the real Skeptic Zone studios here in Sydney, Australia. Now, for various reasons, some unrelated to skepticism or the podcast, I have been spending a lot of time in California and North America in general. But it's really nice to be back. And at the top of the show, I send my special thanks to the wonderful Dr. Eugenie Scott, who did so much to help me during my visit. All her efforts are much appreciated, and I hope to see you again soon, Jeannie. Well, maybe not too soon, maybe a bit later on in the year. And speaking of old friends, a big shout out to my old friend Dr. Steve Roberts in Melbourne. And hello to all my Melbourne friends, of course, my wonderful, wonderful Melbourne friends. That's Steve Roberts. You hear him on the show occasionally. Some weeks ago you did, talking about UFOs, and he's been doing that over the years. Well, he had a bit of a bump. He had a bit of a crash in or off his e-bike and is recuperating. So I promise not to send you too many funny jokes, Steve. He seems to have some cracked ribs. I've never had a cracked rib. I can't imagine what that's like, but people say don't tell them jokes. So I did call him and I said, why did the chicken cross the Mobius strip? Does anybody know? Well, to get to the same side. Sorry, Steve, and get better soon. Coming up on this week's show, back to North America with reports from Adrienne Hill, who's normally reporting from Canada, of course, but this week she reports from New Mexico. She went to the New Mexico SkeptiCamp, presented by the New Mexicans for Science and Reason, and she spoke to a slew of people, many people there, including the wonderful people from the Squaring the Strange podcast, Celestia Ward, Ben Radford and Pascual Romero. So looking forward to hearing her interviews with lots of people from the New Mexico SkeptiCamp. Then, sticking in North America, back to Canada. For crying out loud, it's our new reporter, Kat McLeod. And Kat is going to look at graphology, handwriting analysis. And if you go to this week's show notes, I'll also link to an episode of James Randi, psychic investigator, made about 33 years ago in the UK, a TV show where he investigates graphology. So it's a nice little addendum to Kat's report. For crying out loud, it's Kat McLeod. Then Rob Palmer, our guest reporter, winds up his series of interviews from the Triangle SkeptiCamp, and this week he speaks to the one and only, the powerhouse of skepticism, Susan Gerbic. And finally, if that's not enough, we continue in the Trove segment, we continue our series on the New Age from 1988. Now, just yesterday morning here in Australia, I was on ABC National Radio for 1 hour at 4 a.m. Had to get up early, but that's okay. I'm jet lagged, so that's easy. And I spoke about general skepticism and took callers from all over the country. I can't remember where they were all from. An interesting hour. If you want to hear it and hear what people were saying to me, like somebody said they saw somebody levitate, somebody claims to be a water diviner, and so on, just go to the link in this week's show notes. And that was on the program called Overnights here in Australia. That's enough for me at the moment. It's time for me to run downstairs back to the Skeptic Zone kitchen, tripping over the Skeptic Zone cats, Henrietta and Maud, as I go. And I'm just going to have a cup of coffee because it's really early in the morning, and I think a cup of coffee is just what I need. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. you can count on Adrienne. With Adrienne Hill.
Hello everyone, this is Adrienne Hill from Calgary, Canada, reporting from Skepticamp Studios and recently returned from Albuquerque, New Mexico, a city I visited for the first time to speak at their inaugural SkeptiCamp. I had the pleasure of interviewing a number of attendees and speakers, including Stirling Forsyth, who traveled all the way from Federal Way, Washington, and that is Washington State, not D.C. So an incredible distance to come to a SkeptiCamp in New Mexico. Dave Thomas, head of the New Mexicans for Science and Reason, was the MC, entertainer of many talents, and speaker. And he certainly started the conference off with a literal bang. Enjoy.
Good morning, everybody. So 9/11 truthers say that they used thermite to demolish the Twin Towers. Thermite is a mixture of pure aluminum and iron oxide, or what we call rust. And it, when you mix them up and ignite it, which takes a lot of heat, you get this very hot flame that melts steel. So it turns out the byproducts of thermite can be explained simply by noting that there was aluminum in the towers and there was rusty iron. And if you collide them with enough force, if I can smite this cannonball made out of iron against this similar cannonball coated with aluminum foil, it should initiate the thermite reaction and make a loud bang. Here we go. Do another.
It doesn't even look like he's touching it.
Fresh aluminum. One more. There we go.
Wow. Bravo.
So this is Adrienne Hill, and I'm sitting here in the Sherman McCorkle meeting space in New Mexico. And we are just about to start the second day of the New Mexican SkeptiCamp. So far it has been a blast, and I'm sitting here with one of the attendees. And can you tell us your name and where you're from?
My name is Stirling Forsyth. I'm from Federal Way, Washington. And
that's a long way to come. What brought you here?
Well, I always enjoy helping new groups to start, to beef up numbers and get things started. And this is a brand new event for the New Mexicans for Science and Reason. So this is their first SkeptiCamp. So I figured I'd come down and join in. I know a number of the people here. Susan Gerbic is here. Obviously, Adrienne Hill, you're here. Ben Radford, Brian Dunning, a number of people I've known for years.
It's great that you came, and for such a long way. But you're a regular attendee, if I remember, because I've met you at SciCon before. You go to SciCon most years, or have you ever missed one?
I don't think I've missed. I've been to TAM when that was still extant. I've been to SciCon. I've been on JRIF cruises. I've been to many events since I was about 14.
It has been so fun hanging out with you and getting to know you better, because we've met before but never had the chance. And with a small group like this, building the community really is a wonderful experience. Have you been enjoying it so far?
Oh, absolutely. And you're completely correct. A small group can really get to know each other and really create connections, and that helps a lot in expanding and growing over time. Because people, they're your friends. They aren't just somebody that you know over, Facebook or Zoom or the internet. It's somebody you actually know.
Yeah, exactly. And what's your favorite moment?
Honestly, I really enjoyed the physics demos. The very first one that started everything off quite literally with a bang, with a handmade cannonball thermite. It was quite awesome and quite explosive.
It was literally explosive, yeah. It startled us all. It was very, very fun. Well, thanks so much for talking with me and taking the time.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm standing here with another attendee, and can you give me your name?
My name's Mary Catherine Harris.
And what brought you to this SkeptiCamp?
Well, we've been longtime skeptics, and we used to go to the one in Las Vegas, and we haven't been able to go for several years. And when I saw this, I went, aha, this is my chance to go to one that's almost as good as Las Vegas.
The SciCon, is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Are you a local?
Yep, was born here. Yeah.
And what's your favorite moment?
Well, actually, yesterday we talked about that when we went home, and I said my favorite moment was things that I didn't know. I mean, something that I went, oh.
So that happened a few times?
Several times. About 3 times we figured it up. So, yeah.
So it's a learning experience. Plus, you get together with like-minded people.
Yes, and it rejuvenates me, really, because I haven't, like I said, I haven't been to any skeptic things lately, and I kind of, now I'm like, okay, I'm good. I can do it again.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
I'm here with another attendee. What's your name?
Tom Barger.
And what brought you here?
The same thing, like-minded, wanting to learn more about skeptical things that I know you guys research.
We try our best.
Mm-hmm.
And what was your favorite moment so far?
Well, actually, I'm looking forward to the one today on Flat Earth. It boggles my mind that anybody believes that, and so I just want to hear about it.
And I understand you're an engineer, so it really makes it hard to believe.
Oh, yes, very hard.
Well, thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
I'm here right now with one of the speakers at the New Mexico SkeptiCamp, and I know your first name is Kurly, and I did attempt to pronounce your last name before for the Skeptic Zone listeners. Can you say your last name for me and your first name?
Sure. Actually, you got it right. It's Kurly Tlapoyawa. I listened to it last night. I was like, yeah, she did great.
Thank you, because I had to practice that. It's important for me, at least, to try to get it right, but I know it can be very difficult. And you have a really interesting talk coming up. I'm really excited about it. Can you tell me a little bit about what you'll be talking about?
Sure. So the main focus of my talk is about how pseudo-archaeology, pseudo-history, conspiracy theory is actively undermining the goals of ethnic studies programs in the United States, in particular in Arizona and California, here in New Mexico as well. And I'm going to look at a couple of examples on how the history, the cultural inheritance, the archaeology of Mesoamerica has been distorted, sometimes by well-meaning individuals who think that they're doing a good service, but how these things have been distorted and misrepresented within certain ethnic studies and Chicano studies classes, and ways that we can counteract that. And then also go into some of my own personal experience and how the podcast, I'm a co-host of the podcast Tales from Atlantis, where we deal with these things, specifically this topic of pseudo-history, pseudo-archaeology, as it relates specifically to Mesoamerica. So then I'm going to go into a little bit on how I have worked, along with my co-host of the podcast, to counteract these things, and different ways, different approaches of counteracting the effects of pseudo-history and pseudo-archaeology.
And we'll make sure we put your podcast in the show notes. And thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
So I have another attendee here. What is your name and where are you from?
Sonia, and I'm from Albuquerque.
And we've met a few times at the SciCon.
Yeah, we sure have.
And what I love about your attire today, which I always love your attire, by the way, but you have the greatest socks. Can you describe them?
They are my beautiful ghost socks.
I was thrilled because I did a ghost talk yesterday.
I know, that's why I wore them.
It's perfect. So what brings you to this Skepticamp?
Disinformation is a horrible thing, right?
I agree. Well, thank you so much for stopping by to talk.
You're welcome.
I'm here right now with a speaker and an attendee. Can you give me your name and what you talked about yesterday?
Frank Etscorn, and I talked about medical quackery.
And it was very funny. You did it very dramatically.
Yeah, I do that. That's my style, I'm afraid. Yeah, I worked up a good sweat.
Yes, as he discussed various crazy medical history, there was a lot of frustration. But what's your favorite, or your least favorite, I guess I should say, medical quackery?
There's so much. I was thinking about the bat's blood for preserving the breasts of virgins.
Yeah, that one got us a laugh.
I never figured out whether it was males or females. So, we'll have to go with the flow.
And I think you said we have to rub a lot of this stuff on our chest.
Exactly. That's the forerunner of Vicks Vapor Rub. You can't go wrong with that concoction.
My grandmother, just so you know, thought it cured everything.
I'm a hillbilly from Kentucky. We bathed in that stuff. Yeah. And if you ever scratched once, you'd get creosoted with the dogs. Yeah, line up.
Can you explain creosoted with the dogs, please?
Creosote's used to preserve posts and railroad ties, and my grandmother would creosote us if we ever scratched.
Oh, my.
And the dogs got creosoted, too. And look what it did to me.
And so the listeners don't see my guest here. He is, 6'7"?
About that. I don't know, a little more.
So we almost look eye to eye.
Almost. What are you, 5'11"?
That's exactly right, 5'11".
How about that? Oh, yeah. I used to get weights at the circus.
Well, this has been an absolute delight. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for coming down and visiting us.
I'm standing here on the second day of the SkeptiCamp in New Mexico with 3 amazing people. First of all,
I am Ben Radford.
I'm Celestia Ward.
And Pascual Romero.
And I think listeners should be familiar with the Squaring the Strange crew, some of my favorite people. And they have been instrumental in organizing the SkeptiCamp. So what do you think? How's it going so far?
I'm happy with it. It's the first time for anything. We're just trying to get people interested, get the word out. And I'm learning stuff, even as a lifelong skeptic, I'm learning stuff from the other speakers. So this is super cool.
It's been fun.
It's a small group, but this is the first time this has happened out here. And, I like making little goodie bags and, skeptic crates and stuff. So I made 20 goodie bags. They're all gone. We've got a nice little intimate group here. But I think everybody here, years down the road, might be able to say, I was at the first one, and that'll be an intimate crew. And it's just been cool. Dave Thomas just did an amazing presentation, bringing all this math and different trigonomic perspectives to the flat earth theory in nuanced ways that I had never seen before. And it was amazing. And that was just one little talk. We got many more.
Yeah, we're halfway through the second day, so we still have more to come. How about you, Pascual?
Yeah, I think it's great. Ben and Celestia did all the work when it comes to Squaring the Strange. As a lot of listeners know, I try my best to be present. I'm not always. I managed to be here 2 days for a short time yesterday, brought the kids. They had a blast. Celestia did a fantastic presentation. And then I'm here today, hopefully for most of it, actually. And I just think it's been great. I love that, people know us already and that it's a very comfortable space to kind of be in. And the fact that it's starting small is fine because, to be honest, everyone that showed up just really wanted to be here, and it tells me that there is a good base for this here. And, of course, there's a lot of skeptics in New Mexico. We have a strong history here, and I'm glad that people are kind of recognizing it and rallying with us.
And we did get a camera here yesterday from KQRE. I believe that's the call. KRQE. I see I'm not local, Ben is. Channel 13 did a small segment on the news, showing a little bit of presentation by Larry Barker, who is a local newscaster here, investigative journalist who has, with Ben and others, looked at Bigfoot-related stories and Chupacabra and UFO, Aztec, Roswell stuff. And so, by getting it in the media, you're getting it out there so people will understand that there is a community of skeptics.
Yeah, good point. And just getting together with everybody here makes more connections. I met some people who go to SciCon every year. I've never met them at SciCon in a bigger event. And now I've had a chance to chat with them and get to know them. And when I see them in SciCon, we'll be able to say hello again. So this building of community, I think, is really important.
Yeah, and of course, that's one of the things that Susan Gerbic, who was one of the instigators of this, was really emphasizing was, it's not going to be a huge conference ever, and probably for the best, right? We're not trying to compete with the big ones. We're trying to sort of, reintroduce or introduce grassroots local skepticism. So if you're not in some major city, if you're not in Las Vegas, if you're not wherever else, there are still people in your community who are like-minded, who may be Skeptical Inquiry readers or podcast listeners, whoever else, and just those connections can be really valuable.
And it's free.
Yeah, that's a big one.
You know, and like Ben was kind of talking about the grassroots element of this, I think the thing that's really nice about organizing a real get-together like this with presentations and a schedule is that the structure really gets us packing in a lot of information and a lot of connecting that doesn't necessarily happen with your informal get-togethers. And I think that's what's important about doing it this way, is because it draws people in. People are prepared to take information with them and kind of spread it out into the world. And then when they sit down in their little skeptics in the pub meetings and their coffee with friends, they're spreading that, and it's sort of, germinating, out in the world. So I'm really encouraged by this and the fact that, a good number of people showed up, considering what a ground level effort this is.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Cool.
See ya.
The perfect sign.
Well, thanks for hanging out with me at the New Mexico SkeptiCamp. And if you want to see the talks, they will be available within the next few weeks, and I will be sure to let you know where you can find them. Until next time, this is Adrienne Hill.
Hello, this is Maynard. Did you know that you can listen to the Skeptic Zone on YouTube? Yes, I know, sounds crazy, but it's true. Also, you can hear 40 logical fallacies with Michelle Bickersma and funny sketches with Richard Saunders and a host of other skeptics. Just click on the YouTube links on the homepage at skepticzone.tv.
For crying out loud. It's Kat McLeod.
Hello, it's Kat McLeod coming to you from Kitty Corner Studios, located at latitude 53.5-ish in the Northern Hemisphere. As someone who's always been smitten with letters, stationery, pens, and writing, I was intrigued by the idea of graphology, which is the study of handwriting. I know that my penmanship becomes altered when I'm tired, angry, happy, or sad. My writing reflects my mood. But can handwriting analysis actually tell us anything about someone's personality? Graphology has been practiced for centuries. Some say it dates back as far as 500 BC, when Confucius warned, quote, "Beware of a man whose writing sways like a reed in the wind," end quote. Others propose it arose in the West during the Romantic era of the late 18th and early 19th century. Graphologists claim individuals who share certain personality traits write in a similar fashion. So graphologists analyze handwriting to deduce the character traits of the writer, believing that handwriting can provide insights into various aspects of personality. For instance, the size of your letters can indicate whether you're shy or outgoing. Tiny letters suggest introversion, while large letters may signify confidence and extroversion. Widely spaced words might indicate a preference for freedom and independence, whereas close spacing suggests a desire to be among others. Of course, it's important to look at how you dot your I's and cross your T's. High dots on your I's indicate imaginative personalities. Leftward dots relate to procrastination, and circles instead of dots suggest childlike qualities. While not mentioned, I would wager that dotting your I's with tiny hearts would indicate a hopeless romanticism found mostly in teenage girls. When crossing your T's, the length of your T-cross reveals traits too. Long T-crosses imply determination, while short ones may indicate laziness. Pen pressure plays a role as well. Heavy pressure signifies commitment, while light pressure suggests sensitivity and empathy. Personally, I found the weight of the pen, the quality of the nib, ink, and the writing surface plays more of a role in my pen pressure, but clearly, I'm not a graphologist. Ludwig Klages, who is regarded as the father of modern graphology, specified that if someone put a lot of pressure on the pen, they had a strong libido. If they used downward plunging strokes, they had an earthy nature. A G-loop closed horizontally indicates, quote, domestic tyranny often caused by sexual disappointment, end quote. And a changing angle represents a split personality. If you enclose your signature in a circle, you have a, quote, peasant shrewdness and a spider-like attitude, end quote. What exactly, dear listeners, is a spider-like attitude? I'm not sure I want to know. Signatures are apparently insight into your inner thoughts. Illegible signatures may indicate privacy, while clear ones reveal openness. It's expected that an evolved, mature, and balanced individual signs in a clear, simple, and legible way, including characteristics that are similar to their text. A signature is considered legible when the first and surname are easy to recognize. This signifies that you're a person with clear objectives, have a sense for responsibility and duty, who feels identified with yourself. If the signature is always illegible, it denotes a tendency for avoidance, as if to avoid confrontation, and a lack of self-identification. Or, in my experience, you may possibly be a doctor. If the signature includes simplified strokes, this means there's a tendency for general summarization and to achieve the goals that have been set. A signature inclined to the right supposedly denotes an affectionate person who takes initiatives. To the left indicates for these individuals it's hard to give themselves emotionally as a form of self-protection, possibly due to childhood experiences. No slant equates to emotional self-control. I discovered that Edgar Allan Poe wrote a series for Graham's magazine that analyzed the handwriting of famous literary figures. A quick dive into Trove taught me that in the past there were newspapers that had weekly graphology columns, providing insights for readers who sent in writing samples, namely The Mirror of Australia in 1917. And on Thursday, the 10th of September, 1914, the Queensland Figaro announced a new weekly column. Quote, we have been successful in securing the services of an experienced and gifted graphologist who has been most successful in her delineations of character by handwriting. Delineations will appear in each week's issue, end quote. The article goes on to give examples from the previous week, which are akin to horoscopes with the vagueness of the claims. Freud studied graphology in depth and was convinced of its value. He didn't focus on individual letters. Instead, he concentrated on the entirety of a person's handwriting, where the writing was located on the page, how fluid or jagged the strokes were, and how legible it was. He came to the conclusion that handwriting was a window to both the conscious and subconscious mind. When I was in high school, I often found myself bored in class, so I would take notes in reverse, which is known as mirror writing. I'm sure Freud would have had a field day interpreting that fun fact. Other psychologists have studied connections between handwriting and personality using tools like the pseudoscientific Myers-Briggs type indicator. Not quite sure how you try and scientifically prove something using pseudoscience, but that's a whole other show. The results showed no significant correlation between handwriting elements and personality traits. There simply lacks any empirical evidence to support graphology's claims. For the final word, I went to Wikipedia, which states, quote, graphology has been controversial for more than a century. Although proponents point to positive testimonials as anecdotal evidence of its utility for personality evaluations, these claims have not been supported by scientific studies. It has been rated as among the most discredited methods of psychological analysis by a survey of mental health professionals, end quote. So, sorry. While graphology may be entertaining, it is pseudoscience. You won't be able to determine if a person is trustworthy or insensitive based on a writing sample. Your penmanship is not dictated by set characteristics. It's merely one expression of your personality or mood, no different than your fashion choices. While some people may judge you for it, it doesn't mean that they have any real insight into who you are. The words you write carry more weight than the strokes of your pen on the page. On that note, this is Kat McLeod, signing off from Kitty Corner Studios in Edmonton, Canada.
Hello all, this is Rob Palmer. I write for Skeptical Inquirer as the well-known skeptic. This week on the Skeptic Zone is part 4 of a series of interviews with people who attended the inaugural SkeptiCamp in Raleigh, run by the Triangle Skeptics of North Carolina. This event was held on May 25th, which happened to be Towel Day. This time, I talked to Susan Gerbic.
So the Triangle SkeptiCamp is over. We just finished the last day of activities, and I am here with one of the motivating forces that made this happen, Susan Gerbic. I think the Skeptic Zone listeners might have heard of you. Hello, Susan.
Hi, Rob. This is so great to have you here. This has been a blast.
So I had a fun time. It was something that I was not planning on doing, and of course, as people who know Susan might say, she has a way of convincing people to do things they didn't intend to do. And she said, "What are you doing on this date?" I said, "Oh, maybe I can do that over Zoom. I can do a talk." "No, come down in person." And here I am. And I had a great time. So what was your whole role in getting this thing rolling? Besides calling people like me and saying, "Come down here."
So my role is to get people back in person, to meet together in events or lectures or whatever I can do to get us back in person, because that is my full goal. So Skeptic Camp is a great way of doing this. Some of the smaller groups, like the Triangle Skeptics, were a little uncomfortable when I approached them and said, could you see yourself doing a Skeptic Camp in the next 3 months? And then they kind of looked at me with, big eyes and said, well, let me see if there's other people who want to help organize it. And then they kind of get back to me, and then they're like, well, we're kind of busy. They gave me a lot of excuses. And I'm having the same experience throughout the United States with other groups that are smallish, very small actually. And what happens is that I ask them, if you were to do a Skeptic Camp, when would you do it? And where would you do it? What location? Like a venue. And then they tell me, well, we could probably do it around this weekend. And I say, oh, what venue? And then they look and they find a venue. And I say, would that date work for that venue? And they say, let me ask. And then they go and ask, and then they come back, and they've got the date and the venue taken care of. And that's almost all of the work of a Skeptic Camp. That's the hardest part. And you only need 2 or 3 people to plan that part. And then you start adding in the speakers, and that's kind of where I come in, because they have local speakers that they ask them to do something. And then Susan Gerbic says, who's close enough that could probably drive or fly or whatever? And
who's amenable to arm twisting?
Everybody wants to do it. They just need it organized. And I'm just pushy enough to do it. And so my goal was to do 4 of these in 2024. And I think we're going to do 7.
Wow.
And so in 2025, I was going to do 8. I think I'm going to end up having to do like 20. And I think
just to top 2024.
Yeah. Well, we had 2. I think we have 2 in Canada. And it's not that they're hard or anything. It's just somebody has to kind of push them a little bit. And all I'm doing is pushing them. And I rented an Airbnb. That's where we're sitting at right now, with 6 bedrooms.
What a fantastic idea. We just figured out the bill for the whole stay here. And you cannot get a hotel at all for that. And this is so much more spacious and has so many more amenities than a hotel.
It's so much fun. We were up till 2 a.m, several of us last night, talking about something we heard at the conference.
I think it was 3.
So interesting.
I think it was 3 o'clock in the morning.
And it's just like we have 6 speakers staying here, and we have so much room. And, you could go off on your own and just have some quiet time if you want, or You can spend time just talking. And then other speakers who are the organizers have been spending their time here. We played Cards Against Humanity. We've been, just hanging out. It's been so much fun. It's like a little conference in itself, staying at an Airbnb. I highly recommend it. And several of the people I have never met before, and they're in our Airbnb. And it's like a kinship. It is
so different from doing something online, which a lot of groups still want to do. They just want to do a Zoom meeting.
Yeah, just forget about the online stuff. I mean, if you have to do it, yeah, but come on, you guys, let's get back in person. So I hope the other people that you've interviewed, Rob, have made it clear how important these are to get our community back together again, because, it's a mess. And we have to start doing regional conferences. That's the next thing to do. So if you can sister up with a small group, within a couple hours drive or a few hours drive from each other, do so. Maybe one puts on a SkeptiCamp, and then 4 months later, another one puts on a SkeptiCamp, and 4 months later, another one puts on a SkeptiCamp. And, if you only have 25 people or 15 people attend, it doesn't matter. It's about getting together again. They're not that expensive. I mean, you could do them low price. Heck, we could have had everybody in this Airbnb now that I'm looking around. I don't think they would have liked that much, but so that's what I am. I'm just kind of pushy.
How expensive was the fee to go to this SkeptiCamp? Tell everybody.
Oh my gosh, it was so expensive, you guys. We charged people absolutely zero.
It was zero.
Zero to attend. I'm putting on one in New Mexico. I'm sure this will have already aired by the time the New Mexico one's coming out. And then we have one in Buffalo, New York, that's going to be in July. We have one in Seattle in August, Eugene, Oregon in August. And I'm hearing from people who are writing to me and saying, could I do one in my area? Is there one nearby? Can I do it? Anybody who wants to reach out to me, I will happily help you. It's really not that hard. There are not that many rules. It is an absolute blast.
Okay, thank you so much, Susan. I think that will be our last interview from the Triangle SkeptiCamp.
Thank you.
That wraps it up for my series of interviews from the inaugural SkeptiCamp in Raleigh, run by the Triangle Skeptics of North Carolina. Thank you all for listening to my interviews, and thank you to all the organizers for creating such a successful event.
(2024) Skeptical Conference, the Northern Californian meeting on science and skepticism.
Hi, this is Dr. Eugenie Scott from the Bay Area Skeptics, and I'm excited to tell you about the 2024 Skeptical Conference happening online July 19th to the 21st. Skeptical, now in its 13th year, brings stimulating and entertaining speakers to a worldwide audience of science fans, critical thinkers, and questioners of extraordinary claims. Join us for 2 engaging days of speakers, interviews, and discussions. And try your hand at matching wits with a panel of famous skeptics playing Skeptical's popular Skepperdy game. We'll be kicking it off with a global Skeptics in the Pub event that will zoom around the world over a 24-hour period. The lineup of local and international speakers is one of the best yet, with
Australia's own Dr. Karl Kruszelnicki and Melanie Trizic-King from Thinking is Power on a panel talking about media literacy and the TikTok generation.
Science journalist Erica Engelhop dives into myths and misconceptions of female anatomy in Lady Bits.
A panel of professional musicians, including George Shrub from the Geologic podcast and Helen Arney from Festival of the Spoken Nerd, will talk about bringing critical thinking into their craft in The Music of Skepticism.
Canada's Dr. Joe Schwartz of McGill University's Office of Science and Society will give your weather forecast for the storm of misconceptions hitting society in his talk, The Pseudoscience Tsunami.
AI expert Kyle Polish from The Data Skeptic will be interviewed about the skeptical state of artificial intelligence.
Dr. Dan Wilson from the popular Debunk the Funk YouTube channel will give his unique take on modern vaccine myths.
We'll have another episode of our popular skeptically themed Jeopardy game show, Skepity, with contestants Dr. Steve Novella from The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, Michael Marshall, editor of Britain's The Skeptic, and No Illusions from The Skepticrat.
Oh, and me. I'll be chairing a panel with internationally known misinformation researchers talking about pre-bunking fake news in an election year.
The 2024 Skeptical Conference is the Scientific Skepticism Conference brought to you by the Northern California Skeptics. For tickets and more information on the event, including the first ever global Skeptics in the Pub, visit www.skepticalcon.com. Time once again to go back to the digital archives and the other archives like microfilm of newspapers in the past to look up references to things of interest to skeptics. This is part 2 of our 3-part series looking at a report 36 years ago in the pages of the Sydney Morning Herald in the Spectrum section called The New Ages, Ordinary People, Amazing Beliefs. And the section heading here says, the New Age is booming. Australians spend $50 million a year on it, from crystals to float tanks. In Sydney alone, 25,000 people have hugged and cried their way through transformational courses. Philip Clark investigates the movement and found doctors, lawyers, and ordinary people with extraordinary beliefs. And now we'll pick up from where we left off this section last week. Money and you might seem a little far from the idea of spiritual harmony, but for New Agers, the ring of the cash register is no more discordant than the tinkle of New Age music. Guilt has no place in the New Age. Cafe proprietor Mr. Ken Bergen, a graduate of Money and You, discovered the New Age about 3 years ago. It was like coming out of black and white into a colour film. He says, I learned about my anger and I got a sense of my own courage. He says the course spurred him to leave his job and started up Cafe Troppo in Glebe Point Road. I was able to get out of a bind and was in my business. The course taught him about the win-win concept, by which neither party loses any transaction. Sure, I make money, but I give people service and a good time. For many, the New Age is a convenient label for their feelings about ecology, lifestyle, and health issues. Ms. Anne Gingell is a partner in an interior design firm in Surrey Hills. She is the former wife of television supremo Bruce Gingell and has dabbled in New Age ideas for some years. She feels skeptical about many aspects of the movement, but admits its attractions. She is a graduate of several insight courses and is interested in shiatsu massage and yoga. Where I see the value is that most people haven't got a religion. Everyone needs to have a spiritual base, God or whatever. It's giving people a base or a point to their lives. It's giving people a path so they know what they want out of life. That's why it's so successful. She also sees it as a very inexpensive form of psychoanalysis, though she doesn't support the confrontational approach of some courses. Her verdict on seminars? They open doors. It's like peeling back the layers. They've changed enormously. I would not have survived without using those tools. I'm much more open, more relaxed, more approachable, and very self-sufficient. My life is easier because there is a purpose. She agrees that the New Age is concerned with money, but denies that it legitimizes greed. Insight teaches you there is nothing wrong with having money. It's your attitude that's the important thing. Crystal shop owner Ms. Sally McBride is an adherent to the more mystical side of New Age, yet feels it provides a sense of belonging. I think the whole thing about the New Age movement is that it teaches you to be honest to yourself. It's okay to think what you think and feel what you feel. In society, we play a lot of games. It teaches people to get in touch with their basic self. People are very isolated from each other. She says the New Age movement isn't a religion. I hate religion. It has a lot to answer for, and it's not very spiritual. The New Age thing helps people flow more with universal laws and take more responsibility for what they create. And on this page, there is a subsection called Inside Sydney's Float Tanks. New Agers like to relax in float tanks. They are large coffin-like structures made of plastic and filled with about 30 centimeters of saturated Epsom salt solution. In such a soup, the body floats without effort. The Balmain Float Tank Centre is completely decorated in placid pastels. It's very quiet. The floating room contains one tank for singles or two separate tanks if you like floating with a partner. The tanks are enclosed. The room is softly lit and staff request that you shower before commencing a float. The tank is entered via a hatch in the side that slides up like a roll-top desk. Earplugs are supplied so that your hearing is diminished and to protect against the extremely salty water. Once inside, floating in complete darkness with the latch rolled down and the lights dimmed, there is almost total sensory deprivation. The normal float period is an hour, at the end of which New Age music is piped through the water to remind you that your time is up. After the float, you are shown to a comfortable lounge room in order to sit quietly for a few minutes before leaving. It is said to be at the very least relaxing, at the very best offers deep emotional and spiritual refreshment. Whether this is so may depend on your expectations, or perhaps on the number of floats you take. The Balmain Centre recommends at least 3 to realise the full benefit. At $25 a time, cheaper if you buy sets of 3 or more, it is not a cheap way of unwinding. So I guess we could look at that in today's dollars approaching $100 an hour. In the New Age, even relaxation is a product. Many find a good lie down at home at least as relaxing and certainly a lot more economic. The first float can be pretty boring if you are not properly tuned into the universe. It is also not as comfortable as it sounds, as the neck muscles can become painful and the salty water irritates the eyes. Nevertheless, floating is big. There are more than 12 float tank centres in Sydney, similar to Balmain. Several have opened in the past 6 months. Even the Institute of Sport in Canberra has installed tanks as an aid to athletes' relaxation. It's the New Age way. There is also something deeply ironic about the fact that the Balmain Float Centre is housed in what was once the Balmain's Working Men's Institute. A leaflet at the Balmain Centre explains that there are no fewer than 8 theories as to the efficacy of floating. These range from a view that the lack of gravity releases, quote, vast amounts of energy, end quote, to deal with matters of the mind and spirit, through to a theory that floating encourages greater right hemisphere brain activity. Another hypothesis is that millions of years ago we were all, quote, aquatic apes, end quote, and floating helps us to, quote, connect with our heritage, end quote. And another insert in this section on the next page, or a few pages later, has a picture of Sally McBride. It says, Sally McBride with polished, clear quartz crystals, her New Age old friends. And the picture is of Sally McBride somehow lying down with some sort of cloth around her and about 20 crystals around her head. For Sally, all is crystal clear. Sally McBride looks a little like an Earth Mother with her amethyst-coloured jumper, a floral dress, long flowing hair, and clear green eyes. She runs the Vaucluse Crystal Light Gallery, the Sydney outlet for the biggest crystal supplier in Australia. And Vaucluse being a particularly affluent part of Sydney. It's in a building behind a fine bungalow in Vaucluse. The New Age music tinkles in the background and small waterfalls run outside. The shop is crowned with hundreds of glistening crystals, from small stones to not much bigger than a match to huge hunks of crystals the size of garbage bins. They sparkle in the light. Some are very beautiful. There is incense in the air. Many New Age followers believe that crystals have healing powers and can be used to communicate with others. For me, crystals focus, intensify, and amplify energy, she says, because they are energy. They have been used in science for years and years. And this basic misunderstanding of crystals continues to this very day. Crystals can cost as much as $3,000 for a large one to as little as a couple of dollars. We have something to cater for all price ranges, she says. Everyone from Westie builders' labourers to Double Bay matrons and yuppies visits the gallery. Ms. McBride says many people in the New Age movement have delved into their past lives, particularly in Atlantis. Reincarnation is a standard New Age belief, and found that crystals are part of daily life. She points out the uses of some crystals. Amethyst works on emotion, gets emotional equilibrium back in balance, good for people under a lot of stress and pressure, good for offices because it makes them a very tranquil place to be in. Rose quartz, a gentle crystal, pure love energy, a heart healer, very soft and nurturing. Clear quartz energizes, strengthens, and protects, can be used from healing your big toe to getting in touch with your higher self. Smoky quartz brings light into dark, spirit into matter. Pyrites, fool's gold, good for oxygenating the blood, good for asthmatics. She says other crystals can help you get in touch with similar souls and get rid of negative attitudes. You can put the crystals in your pocket, wear them, or do whatever you like with them. There's no hard and fast rules. Whatever feels right for the individual is right for the individual. If it feels right, do it. If it doesn't feel right, don't do it, Ms. McBride says. Big is not necessarily better. It's all about energy exchange. If you put lots of energy in and love, it attracts it and you get lots back. It's how it seems to work. Sally became interested in crystals 5 or 6 years ago. I just liked them. It was like finding old friends. She has now more than 50. She is completely at home in the New Age, has done rebirthing therapy, and has spent 4 months at Findhorn, an alternative community in Scotland, and that might be pronounced Findhorn. It's always been part of me. As a kid, I was always drawn to astrology and tarot. She says, if you look after yourself and you're happy, you've got a lot more to give to other people. And that was the end of part 2 of this report, The New Ages, Ordinary People, Amazing Beliefs. And next week we'll conclude with part 3, and that deals more with people like channelers like J.Z. Knight and Ramtha. And what an interesting find this is from 1988, this whole report. But it shows that when you do a little bit of research and you dive into the digital archives, or indeed you go to your local library which may have microfilm, well, you never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast, and thank you to those people who subscribe with PayPal or Patreon. especially to my new subscriber just this week. Thank you very much. And to the people who have been with me for a very long time subscribing, of course, many, many thanks. But of course, thank you to everybody who simply listens. And if you don't subscribe, that's okay. I'm glad you enjoy the show. You should thank the people who do subscribe, though. And if you do listen and you enjoy it, why not tweet about it or tell your friends or Facebook it or something like that? Share the links. It all helps me very much keeping the show going. And a note to those people who left phone messages for me while I was overseas. Because of reasons, I don't get those messages until I get back, but I did hear them and I'll try to contact you very soon. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from cold and wet and dark, because it's pre-dawn, Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for episodes and show notes with links going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone on Facebook, X, TikTok and YouTube by clicking the links at our homepage, together with links to support the show financially via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily those of the Skeptic Zone podcast or any other skeptical organisation.
Hello to those people who listen after the music once again for the dice game. This is where we roll a die and, well, it's a bit of fun really, but you can pretend that you have psychic power and guess or predict or whatever you want to do, or listen to this and then cheat and then impress your friends listening to it again. We're going to roll this die, and this week it's a D12, so there are 12 numbers. We're going to roll it 3 times, possibly 4. I'm going to write the results on my Skeptic Zone notepad with the Skeptic Zone pen here on the Skeptic Zone desk near the Skeptic Zone microphone. Here we go. Roll number 1 in the Skeptic Zone dice rolling machine. Thank you, Greg Doré. The first number is 4. All right. Here comes the next one. That's a 7. 4 and 7, here we go. Next number coming up. 8. 4, 7 and 8. And now the supplementary, the extra number just for fun. Well, it's all just for fun, I think. 2. Sorry, Susan Gerbic. No 5 this week.